Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. Here's your host, Brian Hanley.
Hey, everybody, what's going on? This is your man, Big B, Brian Hanley, along with our special guest today, Ryan Gilbert from Go PowerCat. We are talking Big 12 hoops today. Welcome, everybody, back to the Big 12 Insiders, man. We appreciate it. Look, Sweet 16 is today. We're talking hoops. All four teams in the Big 12, or four teams are left from the Big 12. We're going to talk about all four of them today. Houston plays tomorrow, but we're going to cover that today. Talk about the spread, what we expect, and what does it look like for the Big 12? Like, what's successful it is as far as winning in the Sweet 16? Is it one team advancing, two teams? What would be a success coming out of this weekend? So we're going to break all of that down for you guys today. We appreciate it. Again, before we get started, remember everybody to like, follow, subscribe, continue to get in that comment section. And as always, hit the notification bell so you know exactly when Big 12 Insider content comes on. So without further ado, let's get into it. First things first, Ryan, my man, how are you doing today?
Big B, I'm good. I appreciate you having me on. It's, people like me have a little more free time when the team is not in the NCAA tournament. So it's been nice to relax for a little bit, but I'm glad to be with you here.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, man. Yeah, it was a little rough go for Kansas State this season, but, as we've seen so many different times here in the last 2, 3, 4 years, teams' fortunes can turn around pretty quickly. With everything going on, the transfer portal and all that good stuff. So hopefully K-State can make a quick turnaround. But let's get into the games, man. So first off, there's 4 teams from the Big 12 that are still left in the tournament. Now, there's 7 from the SEC, but they had 14 get in. So as far as a percentage-wise, Ryan, the Big 12 had the highest percentage of any conference as far as teams that initially made the tournament that are still playing. They were at 57%. The next SEC and the Big Ten were at 50%. So for me, and for what I said, and look, I've been pumping it up, is that the Big 12, they had, it's, to me, I think they're the second best conference. I can't sit here with the straight face and be hypocritical and to tell you that the SEC wasn't the best this year. You look at the non-conference stuff, that's where the SEC made their mark, was early in the season. They beat everybody, and what are you going to say? Well, I know you beat everybody, but you're not the best conference. You can't do that. So I get it. But having 4 teams got to mean something, though, Ryan. We had 7. We still have 4 left, in a conference that a lot of people tried to say was third. I think it's got to mean something, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. And, everyone from the Big 12 that got in deserved to be in, and that obviously can't be said for some of those bottom teams in the SEC. Now, yeah, you're 100% right. SEC is proven that it is the best. Now, how big of a gap is it? That maybe remains to be seen here with this weekend and perhaps next weekend as well. But yeah, in the Big 12, this is important for them. And I don't know if we're wanting to get into this later or now, but it's absolutely important for the conference and what success might be. Big B, were you want to get that now or later?
Yeah, we'll talk about it later. I just
so
wanted to get your initial thoughts on it. That's all.
Yeah, it's important for sure.
Yeah, definitely important. So let's get into some of these games today. Today, there's 3 games. To me, it's a huge day for the Big 12. We'll break it down here. First off, BYU against Alabama. Alabama, first of all, the style, they're pretty much, they play the same. Both teams want to play at extremely fast pace. They want to get as many good shots as possible and get up and down the floor quick. The over-under on this is crazy, 175.5. To me, that's wild. But when you take a look at it, especially when you look at it from a BYU perspective, they're plus 5.5. But BYU, when they've been winning a lot of these games, when they went on their run, Ryan, they were scoring in the 90s. And a lot of these teams, now there was a few blowouts, but a lot of these teams were scoring right there with them. They just were able to make enough plays at the end to win. Now, so their defense wasn't spectacular, but Alabama's isn't either. So this is an opportunity for BYU to win this game. I'm picking BYU because I just think they're going to make more shots. Alabama gets up and down the court, but they struggle sometimes to make shots. But I think BYU is going to get enough open looks. They're going to knock them down. I think they win this basketball game.
Yeah, like you said, with BYU, it might come down to who just makes more shots with given the pace.
Right.
Likely, it's interesting. If the over-under's 200, a 5.5 point spread maybe doesn't mean as much as if the over-under's 120, right? So it'll be interesting, man. The pace, you're correct with, so Bama in terms of possessions per game, Bama is number 1 in the country. Big B, you look at BYU, though, 145th in the nation at 70.8 possessions per game. Now, obviously, I think towards the latter half of the season, we saw them get up and down more, kind of settle into things. And so, yes, it's going to be a high-paced game, but that's interesting. I don't necessarily have an angle here. Does that help BYU? Does that hurt BYU? But, do both teams just want to get into a straight battle up and down the court? You'd probably think the answer is yes, but BYU on the season hasn't always been the case with them. So I do like Bama here. I think Bama's going to make a run to the Final Four. That's been my prediction here to meet Houston. But if this game was like a Elite Eight game, right, and you're playing 2 days, with just 1 day rest between games, I like BYU more with that depth. But that depth maybe doesn't mean a whole lot when you've got 4, 5, 6 days off of rest between games from that round of 32. So I do like Bama to move on here. I think 5.5 is a good spread. It should be close. Teams are going to be getting up down the court, hitting shots. It might, like you said, Big B, just come down to who's hot, who's hitting more shots. But BYU's got depth, of course. But does that really mean much in this game? I don't know. I'm not sold on that. So I do lean Bama here. I think the Crimson Tide get it done and move on.
Gotcha. The one thing about, and you bring up a good point as far as possessions per game, BYU, I think what hurt BYU is that in the games that they lost, they went on a 3-game losing streak during the season in Big 12 conference play. Basically at the start of Big 12, those teams slowed them down and they were in a shooting slump. And when those teams slow you down and then you're not shooting very well, they didn't score a ton of points. And it cost them. I think BYU got so much better as the season went on. First off, and a lot of people don't talk about this, Ryan. Kevin Young's their coach, came from the pros. The pros don't practice that much. He had a comment early in the season, and it kind of hung with me, is that he's getting used to all the practice time during the season. And I think it was really an adjustment period for him to in the pros, they don't practice very much because, they play 2, 3, sometimes 4 games a week. I mean, they're playing a lot, where in college, you play 2 games a week. Sometimes you only play 1 game a week. So there's a lot more practice time. And I think it was a little bit of an adjustment for him, to get going. Obviously, he's a first-year coach there, so there's always going to be an adjustment period. And I think as the season went on, I think he got more comfortable, understood, again, what his team was, what they could and couldn't do, and they started getting the ball up and down the court a lot more, even though they had some high-scoring games early, but that was mostly against teams that weren't that good. But as the season went on, we saw BYU was better. I just like BYU in this basketball game. I really do. I think they have an opportunity to win. I'm picking them to win. I picked them to get to the Elite Eight all along. I just think it's one of those games. Look, Nate Oates is a good coach. Not going to deny that. But if it comes down to an X and O, I think Kevin Young's better. And I think it's going to come down to that. You can't underestimate coaching. I always say this, is that in the NBA, coaching matters a little bit. It's either you got the players or you don't. Don't get me wrong. There's always good coaches at the professional level. But in college, coaching matters. And if you can get your guys to believe in a system and get them in and out of sets better, coaching matters. And I like Kevin Young more than I like Nate. And again, Nate Oates is a great coach. I just happen to like Kevin Young better, which is why I'm giving him the advantage in this game.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, real quick here, Big B.
Yeah.
One point for pro BYU. I will say that you're looking at a team that's very hot, and clearly that loss to Houston in Kansas City is just kind of a thing of the past and maybe just a little bump in the road. and it's all about getting hot in March. We all know that. And
yes,
for BYU to have, what was it, like mid-February, I believe, the last time they
Yep.
lost a game outside of that Houston loss. They're hot. They're clicking at the right time. To your point, I think that's that's awesome for BYU. On the flip side, though, you mentioned the coaches, and it's maybe not about the coaches, but just the programs, right? BYU does not have Final Four experience on this roster.
No.
And Bama, Nate Oates, last year obviously was there. So that's another reason why I do lean Bama, just that experience and what they've done, and they kind of know how to do that to make a run in March. Whereas, you're looking at a first-year head coach, and it's tough, and guys can get hot, like we said. So it's, there's different angles here, and that's why you got to play the game, because there's not one clear-cut winner.
Correct. I love and just that point about BYU getting beat by Houston. Sometimes teams just have your number.
Yeah.
And Houston just appears to have BYU's number. I mean, they beat them by 20 in the tournament. They beat them by almost 30. I think it was 30 in the regular season. Sometimes a team just has your number. And it appears this year that this Houston team may have just had that BYU's number this year. But I still like this BYU team playing really good basketball. Moving on, Arizona taking on Duke. Duke is favored by 9.5. Over under is 157 and 157.5 on this game. Look, I like Arizona, but this is the one game that I think that they're going to struggle. This is the one game that I think that the Big 12 is really going to struggle. Duke, to me, Duke is the best team in the tournament, and I think they're the best team in the country. It's going to be very, very difficult for Arizona is going to have to play, number one, their A game, but Arizona's stars are going to have to play like it. It doesn't mean it can't happen, but this is one of those where, okay, what are we doing here? Well, yeah, Arizona's going to have to play their best basketball game of the season to be able to beat Duke. I'm not sure. I think Duke wins this one. I'm just not sure Arizona can win this game.
Well, Big B, you can't call me a Big 12 homer because I just picked Bama, but give me the upset, man. Give me the upset. And for a couple of reasons. Arizona's battle tested, and ACC and Big 12 is just night and day difference. And Duke has the number one margin of victory in the country. It's like 21 points a game. So they're just blowing out teams. So if you can make this game close, if you're Arizona, give yourself a chance. You've been there. You've done that. You've been in dogfights in the Big 12, whereas Duke's just been beating up on a lesser competition in the ACC.
Correct.
You go to the non-conference, though, you look at Duke's notable games there. You lose to KU. You lose to Kentucky. That doesn't excite me there from Duke's perspective. Now, of course, you beat Auburn, and Big B, you beat Arizona, which is interesting. And they kind of thumped Arizona from start to finish. Duke won that game. And from here to, I guess, where things were at that point in November, December in the non-conference, both teams have started to play a little faster, and that was a much lower scoring game out in Tucson. And Caleb Love was 3 of 13 from the field. He was 1 of 9 from 3-point range. And Big B, we know the storyline there with North Carolina and the rivalry there. And I'm sure you saw Tommy Lloyd's comments about, hey, this is Arizona Duke, this is North Carolina Duke. But this game's going to mean a lot to Caleb Love. So if Arizona wants to pull off this upset, he's going to have to play his A game, which he's certainly capable of doing. And you look at the way he played against Duke and just the poor shooting performance he had. I think he had 8 points overall.
Yeah.
This is the game of his life, right? And he's going to bounce. I think he's going to bounce back from that. I like Arizona here to pull off the upset. I know you say Duke's your favorite team, best team in the country. Arizona's just been there, done that, whereas Duke's just been kind of blown by opponents. And Tommy Lloyd's been he's older, right? He's got more experience as a head coach. John Shire he's done a heck of a job. He's done a heck of a job, man. You can't deny that. But you've got to use some of that wisdom to your advantage if you're Arizona. So I think Arizona pulls off the upset, man. Call me a homer all you want, but I think they get it done.
Hey, we like Big 12 homers on this show. We like to call it like it is, but we're okay with Big 12 homers on the show. Having said all of that, here's the one thing I would say about Caleb Love is that first of all, he has experience. You know, he took that North Carolina team to the national championship game that lost to KU. He got on a run in that tournament where he was absolutely phenomenal, where he had been pretty good during the season, and then he took it to another level. If last game is any indication, Ryan, maybe he's about ready to get on that run again, because he was phenomenal last game. And if he can get on that run and get a couple of other guys to go with him, I like it. You know, it's definitely doable. That's the one thing. It's doable. Like, Duke is not a team that can't be beat. There's no team in this tournament that you look at and you say, okay, nobody, like last year, nobody was going to beat UConn. UConn was just better than everybody. It wasn't that they were stacked with a bunch of NBA players. They were just stacked with outstanding college basketball players, and they were just a better team than everybody, and everybody knew it. You weren't beating them. That's not the case this year. There's no team that you look at and you say, oh, they can't be beat. Duke can absolutely be beat. And you're right about Caleb Love in that first game. He played bad, you know, but he's kind of turned that around. He's turned the corner. And again, if he can catch fire, because you're just looking at it, it's tough to shut people down in basketball. Like, you know, back in the day when rules were different, you could kind of get into people and slow people down and stop them. Basketball wants too much scoring now, so they don't allow you to really play defense the way that you used to just shut somebody down now. So you're not going to do that. You have to kind of rely on them missing shots. If Caleb Love is making shots, they're going to have a chance. They're absolutely going to have a chance. Now, if I was a betting guy, Ryan, 9.5 seems like too much. You mentioned that Duke's blowing everybody out. The ACC was absolutely awful. They got 4 teams in the tournament. Everybody that's sane absolutely knows they only deserve 3. And of those 3, look, I'm a diehard Louisville fan. Oh, we got robbed with an 8 seed. We did. Then we got smoked in the first round. So what are you going to do? Clemson gets beat. The ACC was god awful this year. You know, Duke was beating teams, but they're like the 5th place team. They beat them like by 40 points twice. Like, how does that happen in that kind of a conference? It just wasn't very good. So when was the last time that they were really battle tested? You know, in a game, you know, maybe the ACC tournament final, but even that game got away from Louisville. You know, they haven't really been that battle tested. I guess you could say the North Carolina game, the one before that, but that was a game they were up 20 points and they just let off the gas. So I don't think it gets away from Arizona like that. So if you put, and if the 2 coaches, I don't know, I really like both coaches. John Shire, people talk about, you know, he's young and he hadn't done it that long, but you look at what he's doing. He's a really good basketball coach. First of all, he was a really good player, and he's also a really good basketball coach. If people don't know, John Shire scored over 2,000 points at Duke. You know, was in the NBA until he had that bad eye injury. So he was a really good basketball player, and he's a good coach. So, but we'll see. Again, that's why they play the game. I like Duke to win, but if I was betting, 9.5 seems like it's too much for me. 9.5 seems too much, Ryan.
Yeah. And like I said, man, you kind of touched on it, but against maybe like teams, Duke's 500 on the year. Beat Auburn and Arizona, lose to KU and Kentucky. So Arizona's just played a much tougher group of teams for.
Yes.
And Arizona's non-conference I talked about the pace, let alone Arizona's a much different team. Arizona's they were sub 500 like 10 games in. Like they did not have a good non-con. Come a long way. And so I wouldn't put much stock really into that game. And really, I guess any game from that early in the year, but especially, you know, Arizona's a completely different team from what we saw to start the season. You're not going to get a 4 seed, right? When I think it was 4 and 5 to start the year. You got to win a lot of games from that point on, and clearly they have.
Well, and that's why people wrote off Arizona at the beginning of the year. They thought, oh, they're losing these games. They lost to Wisconsin, then back to back they lost to Duke, because at one point they had lost 4 or 5. They lost to Wisconsin, Duke. They beat Davidson, and then they lost to OU and West Virginia. And then you're thinking, because the West Virginia game was in a tournament. It wasn't in conference. And you're thinking, oh, man, this Arizona team is not very good. And then they flipped the script. They just got better. They just got better. You got to give coaching a good hand to that, but also the players. You look at them and you said, look, we're Arizona. We're not going down this way. We're a much better team than this, and they just got better. So I like this one to be close. Moving on, Arkansas against Texas Tech. Now, Tech is a team that I've liked all year. I've been singing their praises all year long, Ryan. I like the way that this team plays. To me, this comes down to this. If Tech is healthy, if everybody plays, look, nobody's going to be 100% healthy. I know that the whole cliche is everybody's got an injury this time of year. Okay. But Tech's injuries where guys were out, that's different than guys playing through being hurt. That's totally different. If Tech has all of its guys, Tech wins the game. If they don't, I don't know that Tech can win. I'll be honest with you, because Arkansas is one of those teams that is ultra athletic. Look, I don't know whether you like John Calipari as a coach, but he is a good coach. He knows what he's doing. He's got good assistant coaches, and they are playing their best basketball at the right time. And you talk about a team that was battle tested and didn't start. They were 0-5 in conference play, 0-5. And they got into the tournament by beating really good basketball teams and figuring this thing out. Arkansas is good. Now, they don't shoot it. They don't shoot it very well, and that's kind of their Achilles heel, but they have some athletes. They can get up and down the court. They can score. They defend. It'll be a tough game. Look, Tech's favored by 5.5, 148.5 as far as the over-under. I like Tech to win, but all their guys have to play, Ryan. If all their guys don't play, that makes it way more difficult.
All right, Big B, we're 3 for 3 here on disagreeing on the picks. You kind of nailed on the head with some of my points I wanted to make. Calipari is a better coach than McCaslin by, let's be blunt here, a significant margin. He's obviously had a lot of success in this tournament, and you're clicking at the right time. You're hot. I think they've lost 2 games in the last month, give or take. And, we kind of mentioned this with BYU. Well, same thing could be said with Arkansas. They are playing their best basketball when it matters most. Whereas Texas Tech has been playing good basketball over the last month. Texas Tech's been playing good basketball for the entire season, right? They're not necessarily just getting hot when it matters most. They've just been kind of consistent in that regard, which to their respect, there's nothing wrong with that. But you really want to just kind of elevate things here towards the end of the season, which Arkansas has done. You mentioned the athleticism. They've obviously got a check mark there. And, the 3-point shooting, they can still win games. Like, look at what KU did with the zone, right? They're just, and Boogie Flan, getting into the mix with them as well. I had my concerns with maybe jumping on a moving train like that, but clearly it's worked. And you look at Texas Tech, right? Like, it's not seamless to just get on a team and think everything's going to click and gel together. So right. I like Arkansas, man. I don't have much else to add.
And that's the thing. I mean, Arkansas is playing really well. They're long, they're athletic. They can get up and down the court. Their shooting just isn't great, which is kind of the opposite with Tech. Tech can shoot the basketball. And here's the thing about Tech. They play different styles. We hadn't really, I think everybody knows that JT Toppin, obviously what he does in this conference and what he did on the inside, but they literally said, our advantage over Drake is to go inside. We are going to pound them inside. They took 14 3-pointers in this game. The game before that, I believe they set the record for NCAA tournament game for the number of 3-pointers that they actually took in a game. So they can play 2 different styles. Now, going inside against Arkansas, I don't think that's the way. I don't think you're going to want to go and challenge, the athletes and the shot blockers and the length that they have inside. I don't think that's the way. The way to beat them, you need to shoot the basketball. Now, I'm not saying that you can't go inside, because Toppin is better than everybody that Arkansas has. He that flat out, he's better than everybody. He's going to be the best player on the court. I don't have any doubt in my mind about that. Having said that, they need to be able to shoot the basketball. Like, they need Chance McMillan. They need him there. They need him to be able to be there and make some shots for them. If he is, I like Tech in this basketball game. Again, I like Tech. I think they've been good all year. I've been singing their praises all year because I really believe in this team. They kind of look, it's all new guys, but I've been making this point. I think they kind of took on the attitude of the school and the team of being embarrassed last year in the tournament. Is that Tech got embarrassed last year. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It was a black mark for the Big 12, them losing the way they did in the first round. Again, most of those guys weren't there, but I think they kind of took on the attitude of saying, you know what, this isn't happening to us. First of all, we weren't here, but we're not going to let this happen to us again. We're a much better basketball team. We're tougher. I expect, like I said, if everybody plays, I expect Tech to win this game. I think they're a better team. I really do. And if it comes down to shooting, they're going to have the advantage. So I'm going to go for Tech in this basketball game. Last one, Houston. It's on Friday. Houston taking on Purdue, favored by 8.5, over under 132.5. Again, that's a Houston basketball team. And Purdue doesn't get up and down the court either. Not that much. Their best player, they have a point guard that's really good, but their best scorer is inside. But I think Houston's going to be able to take that away because his thing is brute strength. Trey Kaufman-Renn. I like him because he's from my area, my hometown, or right near my hometown. So I know his mother. I know him. I don't know him. I know her because we all grew up around each other. Having said that, Houston's better. I don't think his brute strength is going to be able to be effective against what Houston brings to the table. I got Houston in the Final Four, and I don't think that's style. Last year, they got hung up because of an injury in the Final Four. They were better than Duke. They were going to beat Duke. But when you lose first-team All-American point guard, it's tough to win those type of games. As long as that doesn't happen again, I like Houston to win.
Yep. I don't have much else to add. Houston, I mean, this is Gonzaga's better than Purdue. You know, we can all agree on that. And that's not an 8-9 team. If you look at the numbers and the metrics and like the rating systems, like Gonzaga is one of the best teams in the country. Now the resume, I get why they were at the 8-9 line, but that was, I know Big B, you've kind of touched on this a little bit here on the Big 12 Insiders over the last couple of days, that game, Houston was pretty much controlling it, maybe dominating it.
Correct.
Thumping Gonzaga, and maybe towards the end, did they let their foot off the gas? You know, what maybe happened there? Regardless of what happened, that's a good wake-up call for Houston to say, hey, it's a full 40-minute battle. Can't let a team get back into it. They're going to be locked in, got some rest over Purdue. So, I mean, yeah, I truly don't have much else to add. You know, Houston's been, I've said this on our Arco Power Cat shows, Houston's my favorite to win it all. And this is not the toughest game that Houston's going to have played in the tournament, not the toughest game they've played all year. Not even close.
Nope. Not close. And again, that's not disrespecting Purdue. There's just better basketball teams in the Big 12 that Houston has played and Houston has beat and beat soundly. So, and Houston's going to play their stats. Like, you can't speed them up. You can't get Houston to play outside their comfort zone. That's not what they do. The difference between this team and other Houston teams is that they shoot the basketball so much better. You know, before Houston couldn't shoot the three-pointer as well, and teams would pack it in, and they had problems. This is not one of those teams. You can pack it in if you want to, but they're going to shoot the lights out, and you're going to get, before you know it, you're down 10 points with 5 minutes to go in the first half, and you got 11 points. And that's just kind of what Houston does. They're just like, we're going to grind you down, and they're going to do that to Purdue. Now, Purdue, again, they have a first-team All-American point guard, but their pace and what they want to do, Houston will be able to combat that. They're going to be able to combat it. They're just better than what Purdue is. Again, it's not a knock on Purdue. We've watched Houston all year. We follow the Big 12. They're just a better basketball team. It's just that simple. And I don't think they're going to have any problems. You mentioned it. Wake-up call last week. Let Gonzaga, like I said, they were pasting Gonzaga and then just let their foot off the gas. Gonzaga gets back in the game, and then they have to make a defensive play at the end, which they made to preserve the victory. I don't think it's going to come down to that. So I like Houston.
The three-point shooting real quick, Big B. Houston's a phenomenal three-point shooting team, but does not rely on it, right? They're not living and dying by the three-point shot, which is just a huge factor. You know, we talk about BYU, Bama, like, yeah, you want to get hot at the right time in March, by all means, hit those shots, but Houston can win even if it's not having its best 3-point shooting night.
Correct. Absolutely. And that's a great point, is that they shoot it well, but that's not they don't rely on that to win, because when you rely on it to win and when you don't shoot, because everybody doesn't shoot it good every night, that's where you run into problems. Houston doesn't have that problem because they don't rely on it to win their basketball games. Going to get to some questions here in the chat. I thought this was a good one. All Big 12 championship, Tech versus Houston, will be the only way to destroy the SEC is the best B-ball conference narrative. First of all, I love the statement, Brian. I love that. But even with an all Big 12 final, and I don't think that you can – look, it's a one-game tournament, so anything can happen. But I don't think that would get rid of the narrative as the SEC being the best basketball conference. I think that ship has sailed. And the reason that I say that, we looked at what the non-conference happened, the SEC just dominated, and granted, teams get better. It's not the end of the year. I totally understand, but I think it would take more than just a 2-team tournament or a 2-team final. I think it's more than that, Ryan, that would have to get rid of it.
Well, who's to say, Michigan knocking down Auburn, look at other matchups, right? It doesn't just have to come down to the championship game. And I guess the maximum number is 3, right? Because BYU and Arizona are in the same region, right? So they can't, there's only the maximum is 3 for the Final Four from the Big 12. But you obviously you want that, and of course you want that, like scenario you said with Tech and in Houston. But yeah, there's a lot more that goes into it. I cover K-State. This is a team that lost to they didn't lose. They got just bullied by LSU, who was maybe the worst team, if not one of the worst couple of teams in the SEC at home. And so, yeah, it's obviously like last year. I was certainly one to say this, Big B, that I was disappointed to see the Big 12's lack of success in the NCAA tournament because I believed it was, the best conference in America. Well, the body of work for a full 30, 35 games, the sample size of a tournament, and who's just, the national media narrative, Big B, me and you, we don't matter in that. They're still going to say whatever the hell they want to say.
Yeah. And you're right. And that narrative, that's why I say I think that ship has sailed, because the narrative's out there and they're not going to change their tune. It would have to be a colossal, like all SEC teams would have to lose in the Sweet 16, which we know can't happen because Tennessee plays Kentucky. So it's impossible for them not to get at least one team into the Elite Eight. But I don't think that narrative is going to change. But that's okay, because things change from year to year. So it'd be one thing if people were saying the SEC's been the best conference for the last 15 years or something like that. We all know that that's not the case. But on a year-to-year basis, sometimes they get you. And this year would be one of those years. Doesn't mean that the Big 12 can't push forward, because I definitely think it's better than the Big 10. I don't think that's even up for debate, really. But it helps the argument the more teams that you get in. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, is like, what does success look like for the Big 12 this year, Ryan, in the tournament? Like last year, I think we all knew. A lot of people were saying the Big 12, they manipulated the net. And then look at the tournament. They had 2 teams get into the Sweet 16, and then they were done. And we're like, man, you can't really argue when you look at it that way. We were fighting it, but it turned out, it was kind of true. This year's not that way. Nobody's saying the Big 12 manipulated the net. We got 4 out of 7 teams in. We probably should have had 8 teams in that actually deserve to be in the tournament. We get 7, 4 advanced. After this weekend, what's it look like to say that the Big 12 had a successful tournament?
Well, you look at the betting odds, man. 2 teams are favored, 2 teams are underdog. So I think you probably want to go 2 of 4 in the Sweet 16, and you've got to have a presence right in the Final Four with at least one program. I think if you split these games at the least, and if you go 2 for 4 in the Sweet 16, I guess that's maybe not a huge success, but you are certainly on par, right? Even if Texas Tech gets upset, and if you've got Arizona here on the other hand pulling off the upset, that stuff balances it out. So I think you got to get a couple of wins And maybe I guess you would, for success, Houston's the best team in this league, without a doubt. And
Right.
you want to prove that there's more depth than just Houston. So Houston can do all that at once. And even if Houston does get upset, I think it more falls on, BYU, Arizona, Texas Tech to maybe show that this league has some depth. Because you look at the ACC, there's Duke, and then there's just everybody else, in a distant tier behind them. I think the Big 12 maybe has a point to prove there that Houston won it by 4 games, right? They'd be in the regular season. Like, that's just insane for a conference as good as the Big 12. Well, how good really was the league? Well, Houston can do whatever it wants, win or lose. The rest of your teams maybe need to step up and say, yeah, the top of the league still is strong.
Yeah, that's kind of my thinking too, is that Houston, you win a league by 4 games, and it's not like they played 10 league games. They won it by 4 games, and these other teams are really good basketball teams. Where in the ACC, heck, Duke won it by 1 game. They didn't run away with that conference. You're thinking, well, what are you talking about, Big B? Then how were the other teams not very good? Well, all you had to do was watch. It was Duke was so far better than Louisville and Clemson. The gap between the top and the bottom was gigantic. Well, Houston won by 4 games, and yes, they were clearly the best team in the conference. There's no doubt about that. But the gap just wasn't so much that these other teams just weren't competitive with them. And that's where the difference is that, heck, Tech beat Houston, the one game that they lost. They got beat. So these other teams were competitive. Houston just didn't. Now, they blew out BYU a couple of times, but again, they just had BYU's number. But they weren't just blowing out all of these teams within the conference. And I think people that follow it and paid attention, I think that's where you can get, okay, we know the Big 12 is competitive, but it's one thing for me to say it. It's another thing for them to prove it. That's why I believe you're right. They got to win some games. We got to win some games this weekend. Obviously, we got to have a presence in the Final Four, but we need at least 2 teams to be in the Elite Eight. You have to, because if not, then it's like, well, when you started playing big competition against other conferences, because again, remember this year, no Cinderellas. There's no teams that are not from power conferences. It's the Big 10, the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12. That's it. Not even a Big East team that can stick their chest out. Nope, not this year. So if you don't move on at least 2 teams, then it's, well, how good were you? How deep was your conference? Because you start playing these other leagues against the better teams, and you didn't hold up your end of the bargain. So I think you're right. I think it's got to be one of those where a Final Four team, at least 2 to the Sweet 16, because if you don't, what leg do you have to stand on, especially if there's ends up being like 5 teams from the SEC in the Elite Eight, which there very well could be. Again, I've already said I think the SEC has already got that mantle for the year, but it would the ship would get even wider, and then it would start going into next year, Ryan, because then they would say, look how much better they are, and these teams got all these people back. Then it's really going to be a problem because you start getting into repetitive years, and it's tough to catch up when you have the media train of the ESPNs of the world already wanting to push the SEC as being the top team or top conference.
Yeah, maybe go win it all, Big B. So it was Baylor in 2021, and then KU followed up in 2022, right? Like, you can puff out your chest and just say, hey, regular season, Elite Eight, Sweet 16, all that stuff you can say what you want, but national championships, right? If Houston can do that, you're looking at 3 of the last 5, correct?
Yep.
My math is correct, right? I didn't go to K-State for math. I went for journalism, right? So that's not my strong suit. But and also with Houston, man, of course, the best team in the league, and that's what matters, of course. 1 loss in the league, that is absolutely what matters. But they had to earn those wins, right? They were close games. They're battle tested. They should know how to win in those close games. Whereas Duke is just, I know that we're not really talking about Duke here, but blowing out teams, dominating teams, right? Houston was able to win those close. They were able to win games because they were able to come out on top in some of those games at the end, right? And you mentioned BYU, K-State here in Manhattan, beat them by 30. Colorado, though, on the other hand, they had close games. Colorado played Houston tough, right? Some of those bottom teams, Was it Arizona State? Like, he played Houston tough. Is that correct? I mean, I could be wrong on that, but they didn't always just cruise to wins the way Duke did. And so that's just the Big 12. I mean, I guess we'll see here in the next tonight and through Sunday and hopefully next weekend as well. Obviously Houston matters a whole lot, but those other teams too have an impact here as well.
Yeah, it like you mentioned, Houston, I think, does their thing, win or lose. I think everybody knows they're the best team, but when the other teams, if they hold their end of the bargain or even step up some, I think that says more about the league, regardless of what Houston does, because there's not going to be anybody that understands what, that follows basketball that doesn't know that Houston's the best. And maybe they just think, oh, well, Houston was great, but what about the rest of the conference? They don't know that Houston won. They had a last-second shot to beat UCF on the road. They don't know that, what was it? They came back against Kansas. What were they, down 6 with like 20 seconds to go in Allen Fieldhouse? They don't understand that. They just say, oh, the game went into 2 overtimes and they won. Heck, twice they were down like 6 points, in the last 30 seconds and came back and won. They don't understand that kind of stuff. So, I just think the other teams, and I'm looking at BYU and Tech. I just think it's going to be so difficult. Not impossible for Arizona to win, but it's going to be difficult. I'm really looking at BYU and Texas Tech. Tech's favored, but I'm looking at those two teams to really make a mark this weekend and hold the conference high. So, well, Ryan, I appreciate you, my man. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time. Had a good time on the live. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. We'll have I'll have a recap of what happened tomorrow, and we'll go over a little bit more of the Houston game and what can happen this weekend. So I appreciate everybody being in here. Thank you, guys. Remember, like, follow, subscribe, get in those comments. Let us know what you think, and we will chit-chat with you guys later. You guys have a good one.
Thank you for watching the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. This has been a Spirit Street production.